If you do have questions, just pop them in the chat. I'll be monitoring it as we're going through. So we're going to be taking a look at the back end of Schoology. It's not the most glamorous part, but it is the part that allows the course to function properly. So I'm going to click on grade setup. And again, you're more than welcome to follow along with me and take notes on the side, or you can be in your sandbox course and build in parallel. So we're going to stay focused on the right area here with rubrics. Now, I'm not going to go into the benefits of using rubrics because you are all well aware of that. I am going to go into the benefits of using rubrics within the Schoology platform. There are two of them. One is that you can use a rubric, copy a rubric, collaborate together on building a rubric, and put it in as many courses as you want. And you can attach a rubric to any assignment, discussion board, certain questions in assessments and tests and quizzes. In addition, you have two measuring tools, criteria and learning objectives. Criteria are rubric specific, meaning that it is only going to be found in this specific rubric, and I'm not going to use it anywhere else. So for example, if I was doing a lab on viscosity, for example, I could say that that one of the criteria could be that they are using a shampoo that has either corn syrup or oral sulfate. Right? That's a very specific criterion that I'm going to measure. If I want to, a learning objective are items that are both pre-programmed, pre-populated either by Schoology or by your school or program, or you can build learning objectives. So for example, do you follow a set of, because I know you are a remote school and you're all over the place. Is there a specific set of standards you follow? Is it Common Core? CCF, okay. I don't know if those are Common Core, okay. So you can find the Common Core standards here. So I'm just going to pick a couple. And you can see that it will automatically populate. And I can change the grading scale to meet whatever the criteria are. I can add a grading scale cell. So if I'm going to measure out of 5 points, I can. I can also change the point values. Now, the beauty of using the learning objectives is that every learning objective I use, whether it's Common Core or whether it's one that the institution provides, or it's one that I build, and I'm going to go into how to build your own, it will be measured in the master. So that way I can see the longitudinal data of how the student is performing on these standards, on these learning objectives. Now, there's one caveat to this, which is the pre-populated learning objectives like Common Core, for example, aren't always written in a language that either the students can understand or the parents. It's not has nothing to do with the background or education or whatnot. It has to do with the fact that they're written in educational terminology. Not all of them, but some of them are. So my recommendation is, for example, suppose that we're going to look at this one here, and we want to sort of whittle it down a little bit so that way everyone will understand it. What I can do is I can add a criterion underneath, and I can move it up, and I can explain it. in a way that students or parents would understand. And then what I can do is, so that way it doesn't impact the overall score, I can delete the cells, and except for one, it won't allow me to delete all of them. And I can just change the value to 0. So that way I have the explanation, but it's not going to impact the overall score or reporting. Because I don't need to do it for every single learning objective. And because I
Good
can't.
question.
Yeah, go ahead.
If you change cite several pieces of textual evidence to support analysis ellipses, that will no longer like align to mastery or show up in mastery.
This one here, this one will not show up in mastery, correct? But this one will. That's why I want to put it.
The standards-based text, like the actual standard, if I change that and click into cite several pieces, that will no longer go into mastery.
If you change this one,
Yes.
you'd have to do that from the learning. You're not going to be able to do that unless you use your own learning objective, because it's pre-populated by Schoology.
Appreciate it.
Yep. So in addition, so again, because you can't change the title or the description, but it will populate in the mastery. The other nice thing is that you can build your own learning objectives. So for example, if I was going to convert this criterion into a learning objective, if I was going to measure it over and over and over again, I could build my own learning objectives. And that way I can measure those over a longitudinal period of time. It just doesn't have to be the Common Core. It could be if you have classroom standards. You can also do it for students who are on IEPs or 504 if they have goals and objectives. Create a rubric that measures the student performance on their IEP goals and attach those rubrics to specific assignments and then get the longitudinal data. So I'm going to show you how to do that. Before I do, any questions about building a rubric? All right. Once I'm done building a rubric, the most recent one pops up at the bottom. And then I can either copy that individual one to another course that I'm teaching, or save it to my resources, either my individual resources or to a group resource that I'm working with. Or if I have a bunch of rubrics in my course, I can copy the whole kit and caboodle by clicking copy settings and just selecting the courses for which I'm an admin and then copy them. So that way I don't have to recreate the wheel. Now I'm going to go into building learning objectives. And after that, I'm going to show the difference between attaching the learning objectives to the assignment as a whole versus using a rubric. If you click on resources and you click on learning objectives, this is where you would build your own learning objectives. And these could be built by individual teachers, or you could work as a group. Now, my recommendation is do not build a rubric, a learning objective, without putting it in the folder. Otherwise, you're going to have a long list of learning objectives. So I'm going to first click add and click folder. And I'm going to add it in. Most recent item will pop up at the bottom. Now I have two options. Option one is I can build one at a time. So we could do viscosity. Actually, we'll do a lab. So I can do it that way, or I can bulk import a learning objective. Are you a Google App School or Microsoft or both?
Google.
Google? All right, sweet. So let's do Google Sheets. So I already have some created. Here we go. So when you want to build learning objectives in bulk and you're building them yourselves, you need two column headers, title and a description. And then you just need to put in the information. So for example, here I've got a hypothesis, so I'll just change that to a question. Put in you can also put in IEP goals as well. Now, if you have a list of, for example, if you're using like ISTE, or I know that there are fine arts objectives that just came out, or you have new objectives that you want to create, you're going to have to do the same thing, which is you're going to have to take your spreadsheet or take the document where the other learning objectives are from, and you're going to have to download it as a CSV file. Now that it's downloaded as a CSV file, I can now import the learning objectives in one fell swoop. So it will walk you through how to do it. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to select the folder where you want it to go. Otherwise, it'll go into the main learning objectives and you're going to have to move it around. It's going to be a pain. Now you're going to attach the file. You're going to upload the file. And because we have the proper headers already in place, it's just a simple click of the button. And then you click preview. And I've got my 3 learning objectives. I confirm. Now I've got them locked and loaded. And I'm able to use them for any of my courses that I want. In addition, I can also make this folder available. I can copy it to my group resources. So for example, if I'm in the, let's do the Hamlet groupie. So all the English language arts teachers, or if I'm doing science and stuff, probably make more sense than what we're doing right now. So I could put it in the science group, or I could share it with the entire school. Any questions on designing your own learning objectives or importing bulk learning objectives? So a rubric is when you've got a number of criteria and learning objectives. The question that I got was, what's the difference between a rubric and a learning objective? So the rubric is a number of criteria and learning objectives all in one place where you can evaluate the student's performance on those objectives and criteria. And then a learning objective is one measurement, one data point that you're going to measure. One criteria, one standard that you're going to measure. You got it. Other questions? All right, so now I'm going to go back to our course, and now I'm going to build a rubric using those learning objectives. So I'm going to click on Grade Setup, and I'm going to click on Rubric, and I'm going to build a Science rubric. And I'm going to click on learning objectives. And I'm going to click on custom learning objectives this time, the top. And then I'm going to click on personal learning objectives. And that, if I scroll down, I'll find my folder that I created over in resources. And now I've got my 3 science learning objectives. And I think what I'll do is I'll move this up here. And now I'm good to go. Now, suppose I wanted to create a rubric that had to do with science, but also had a student's IEP, had their IEP goal in it. So now I'm going to create one. That has the student's IEP in it, IEP goal in it. So again, learning objectives. Now I'm going to do all 3 plus the IEP goal. So now I've got my rubrics. So now let's take, what we do, oh, here we go. And we'll do this one here, though I don't think there are any assignments here. Yeah, so we're going to create one. Actually, you know what? I know where there is one. In here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this assignment as an example of what the grading looks like in the mastery when I attach learning objectives to the assignment as a whole versus using a rubric. I'm also going to show you how to individualize the instructions so that way I can assign a version to Sophie and I can assign a version to everybody else but Sophie. So I'm going to use this one, and what I'm going to do is, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to save it to my resources so that way I can pull it in each time. I can't copy an assignment in a live course. I have to pull it in from the resources. So I'm going to pull it in 3 more times. So this is part of the system that could use a little bit of revamping. Where'd it go? There it is. Because it would be nice to be able to add or copy an assignment within a course. But this is the next best thing. Okay, so now I've got 5 of them in here. So I'm now going to just edit them just so that we know the difference among them. So this one here, we're going to do no learning objectives. Rick, just going to put a grade. We'll put and this one we're going to put learning objective. Yep. And in this one here, I'm going to align a learning objective to the entire assignment. So I'm going to click on the target. I'm going to click on custom learning objectives. In this case, I'm going to stick with personal, just because it will stick with our rubrics. But again, you can use Common Core, et cetera, et cetera. I'm going to scroll down to ours, and I'm going to attach these. This one here, I'm going to use a rubric. And to select a rubric, I'm going to click Scale Rubric and go from numeric to the rubric that I want. This one here, I'm going to put in everyone but Sophie. Now, obviously, we wouldn't write that in an assignment, but for our purposes, we're going to, so that way we can keep things straight. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to select the science rubric. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a group, a grading group. And I can go into members. If I go into members, I've got all these individuals here. I can organize them into a grading group. Now, you can have as many grading groups as you want. You can have students in the same, you can have students in multiple groups, and you can have the same student in different groups, depending on what you want. So for example, this one's going to be called Everyone But Sophie. Now, by the way, students and parents will never see these grading group labels. Not that I'm recommending you use them, but now everyone's labeled. Now the student will never see that label, nor will it transfer over to the SIS. It stays here. So now I'm going to go back to my materials. And oops, here we go. So now what I'm going to do is, this is the one where I've got the standard rubric, the science rubric, but now I want to make sure that I only assign it to everybody but Sophie. So I'm going to click on the individually assign option, and I could type in everybody's name, or I could type in the grading group name. Now I'm going to do the exact same thing here. And I'm going to do only Sophie. I'm going to change the point values to 5. Complete. Let's say open your copy and then complete the first. So I've modified the assignment. And I think we did 825 for the previous one, so I'll do the same thing because I want them to have it on the same time. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna select the rubric that has Sophie's IEP goal in it. And now I am only going to assign it to Sophie. Now, if you're not sure, or you think, you might have made a mistake, what you can always do is just unpublish the assignment. So that way, students won't see it until you're ready and you can test it out. The other thing you can do is that if you have test students in your sandbox course, you can test it with them to make sure that it's working the way that you want it to work. Okay, so now I've got 5 versions, all assigned. And if I look in the grade book, I can see how they are working. So this one is no learning objective, no rubric. There's a place value for a numerical score. This one here only has the learning objectives, again for numerical score. This one here has a rubric, and you can see the rubric icon, and it'll pop up. This one here is assigned to everybody but Sophie. And I can see how that works because there's no grade for me to put in. And this one is only assigned to Sophie. Now, if I want to make sure, what I can do is I can click on course options and I can view course as Sophie and make sure that she has the correct one. So she has only Sophie. She doesn't have the one that says everyone but Sophie. So that's good. And I can go back and I can check on Chloe. And Chloe has everyone but Sophie. So this is correct. I've set it up correctly. To save time, instead of me uploading assignments and grading them manually, I'm just going to jump and we're going to pretend that the students have submitted the work and now I'm going to grade it. So I'm going to go into the grade book and I'm now going to enter in scores. Okay, so this one, again, no rubric or learning objective. So I'm going to do a 3.5. This one here has a learning objectives. So this one I'm going to put a 2. This one is a rubric, so I'm going to put 4, 2, 4. And this one here, I'll put 4, 2, 4, and 3. So that was the one that was only assigned to Sophie. And I'll do Jacob. And Jacob will do a 2 here. We'll do a 4 here. And we'll give them a 1 there. Now, if I go to the individual student, I just click on that bar graph. So I get the overall report. And I can see the mastery reporting. So this is the one where it was just the learning objective. I put the entire learning objective and connected it to the assignment. Notice that all of the learning objectives are the same score because the student earned a 2 out of 4 or 50%. When I attach the learning objective to an assignment as a whole, whatever the student earns as a score on the entire assignment will be the score that the student earns on every single learning objective. So the problem is that the student may have earned a 50% because they didn't do the question correctly, right? Or the hypothesis, but they got all of the grammar right. But because I didn't use a rubric to individually evaluate each learning objective, it took the whole score. So this is not as accurate of a reporting on these learning objectives. So the rule of thumb that I offer is when you want to measure specific learning objectives, use a rubric. That's why we started with a rubric. That way you can measure each one individually and you can also see how it impacts the overall score. So if you look at this one here is where each one is measured individually. So the student got 4s on syntax and question, but only got a 2 out of 4 on the hypothesis. That's more accurate. And I can also see if I go to the mastery, I can see how everyone is doing. And I can also see that Jacob did not get evaluated for Sophie's IEP goal, which is good. I don't want them to. So I can see overall how the student is progressing, how each student is progressing and how the class is progressing. Now the different colors, different shades of green or pink have to do with the settings of the mastery. Before I go into that, are there any questions about attaching learning objectives and or rubrics to assignments and seeing the learning objective reporting, the mastery reporting? All right. So when I'm in the mastery settings now, do you provide guidelines as to what the mastery settings should be, or is it up to each teacher or each school? We haven't decided yet. The columns won't repeat for each. Every time you use a learning objective, it's going to add up the summary, the average rather. Ms. Pena asked, will the columns repeat? Aaron says, you think each school. Okay, great. So I'm going to pretend that we're a school. And I'm going to change the meet expectations or exceeds expectations. So I'm going to say for exceeds expectations, in other words, to demonstrate that they've gone above and beyond, typically it would be like a 96 or higher. And meeting expectations, I'm going to set to 7. So let's see what happens when we do that. Okay, so now we have changed the measurement values. I don't know if you can see it clearly, but this is a darker green than this one. They really need to change a different color, like use red, yellow, green, or something like that. Now, the stars mean that the student has quote unquote mastered the learning objective. So I can change that because the mastery means to meet or exceed expectations at least once. Now, that means with one assignment after one attempt. Okay, I'm going to change that to, let's say, 10. And now the stars will disappear because the students have not mastered it yet. Griselda asked a question. Is the student able to see the rubric and their score? Yes, they can. Students can see it. And I don't remember if your students' parents have access. I believe they do, but they can also see it as well. And correct me if I'm wrong if they don't. I remember from the summer, I believe they do. So that 3 there, I know it's a little hard to see on my screen. That 3 represents the number of assignments that this learning objective was connected to. That's what that 3 means. And it tells you which 3 assignments. So it really breaks it down for both you and the student and the teacher. So notice, even though the student here, there were 3 assignments, 2 of which the student got 100%. Because the student did not do well on the last one, this is their overall score. Now, because we've set it to a decaying average, if I set it to an average, then the report is different. If I set it to the highest score, then this also gives a different report. In other words, I'm only measuring mastery as if they've got 100, doesn't matter where, right? It really depends on how you want to measure it. My recommendation is the decaying average includes the performance on each assignment over time. So that way, because we're human, if this student had a bad day, okay, fine. That's fine, but it measures the blip. It includes it. If you want to just see overall, then I would just do the average. Numbers in the top right. These numbers here, Ms. Pena, this means which number of assignments were connected to this learning objective. So for example, the IEP that was connected to Sophie, there's only 1 assignment. Now, from a student's perspective, we'll log in as a student. I'm not going to, there are over 150 courses. So the student has access to the mastery as well. They can see how they are performing. So this is great for parent-teacher conferences. This is great for IEP meetings. This is great for students to see how they are performing and focusing on their goals. In addition, if I log in as a parent, I'm now logged in as the test parent of this student. Clicks on mastery and we go down to our course. Parent can see it too. What's nice about this is, I don't know if you do parent-teacher conferences or any type of meeting like that, but this is great because you can prep the parents ahead of time and say, hey, let's do your homework. We're using this tool called Mastery, and you can see the measurements. And let me explain to you what it means. That don't freak out that your child got a 50 out of 100. Doesn't mean they're failing. It's showing learning. Right? So that way, when you have a parent meeting, or you have a parent-teacher conference, or et cetera, or an IEP meeting, you're not doing the typical protocol of bombarding the parents with so much data and information that they don't have time to process it. So they really can't ask the questions that they want to ask because they haven't even thought about them yet, right? And you're spending as much time as you can explaining it because you want to make sure they understand it. You want to make sure that they don't feel that the report is incomplete. This way, they constantly can see it, as can the students. They can see how they're doing. So that way you can have an informed conversation. That way the parent isn't going to necessarily freak out that there's a 50 here. They may also want to know, okay, what's going on here, right? The student, if they're old enough, you could also have a self-reflection and say, okay, what's going on here? What am I missing? Questions about the mastery reporting? All right. So let me take you on a nickel tour of what's available in this course. Then I'm happy to stay on to answer questions because we completed the training. So in the red folder here, this is where you will find the PowerPoint presentation, as well as I'll be putting the recording in here as well for today. In addition, I'll be making you all admins of the course, so that way you can take whatever you'd like. In the yellow folder, there are instructions on different course structures that you are allowed to do, including making course headers with hyperlinks. So for example, this way each folder is a hyperlink and will take the student directly to where you want them to go in the course or outside the course. All you need is a link. Unfortunately, we don't have time to go into that, but if you would like to know how to do that, I have the information right here, step by step with video, and I will put it in the chat. You have access to it. In addition, there's also a section here about learning objectives, including how to create custom learning objectives or IEP goals. It's the same thing as what we went over before with the CSV file. In the green folder, we've got 3 units that are for middle and high school. Again, just showing course content. If you see something that you want, by all means, so like say, for example, you want to look at the practice assessment, which demonstrates every single question type of the assessment. You want to copy it, just click copy to course or save to resources once you're an admin. I do have in here, there are some items that are for middle and high school and upper elementary. You are more than welcome to take whatever you'd like. Last but not least, I'll be giving you my email address. You are more than welcome to email me if you have questions, whether later on today or a couple weeks from now. And that's it. Are there any questions that I can answer? All right. Well, I'm glad this was helpful. My pleasure. Have a great Thanksgiving, everybody. Stay safe and take care. Thanks so much.